The knock came at 12:07 a.m. Not a knock really, but the hollow thud of a tow hook biting metal, followed by the scream of my car alarm being smothered into silence. I stood barefoot at the window, heart pounding, watching red brake lights glow like a pair of angry eyes at the curb. By the time I yanked the door open, the truck was already rolling, my car swinging behind it like a captured animal. No warning, no note, just gone. I knew exactly who had ordered it. Her name was Linda Crowley, though no one in the neighborhood called her that. She was the HOA president, the self-appointed sheriff of our cul-de-sac, a woman who believed rules mattered more than people, and that mercy was a personal weakness. She had cited me before, over a mailbox height, over a basketball hoop that leaned 2 degrees into the sidewalk, over grass she claimed was a shade too long. But towing my car at midnight? That was new. That was cruel. I'd parked where I always parked, in front of my own house, after a double shift at the hospital. I was a respiratory therapist then, exhausted and still smelling faintly of antiseptic, the weight of other people's breaths heavy on my shoulders. The HOA rule she clung to said no overnight street parking between midnight and 6 a.m. It was written when the neighborhood was built, decades ago, before families had 2 cars and before my mother moved in with me after her stroke. I called the towing company, voice shaking, and they told me where my car was. Impound fee, after hours release, cash only, more money than I had on me. I sat on the curb in the dark, my phone in my hands, and cried. Not loud, just enough to fog my breath. Morning came like it always does, indifferent and bright. I borrowed my neighbor Mark's truck to get to work, swallowing my pride along with my coffee. When I got home that afternoon, there was a notice taped to my door. Another violation, this time for unsightly items, because I'd left my mother's walker on the porch. That was the moment something in me hardened. I didn't want revenge. I wanted fairness. I wanted to be seen. So I did the boring, unglamorous thing Karen never expected. I read. I dug through HOA bylaws, county ordinances, zoning maps, and public records until my eyes burned. I learned that our HOA had authority over common areas, not public streets. I learned the rule about overnight parking had been nullified by a county update years earlier. And I learned something else, something that made my stomach drop and my pulse race all at once. Linda's house, the immaculate corner property with the imported stone facade and the manicured hedges, wasn't supposed to be there. The neighborhood had been built in phases. Years ago, a developer rushed a permit through during a zoning transition. Most houses were grandfathered in cleanly. Linda's wasn't. It straddled an easement reserved for emergency access and utilities. The county had flagged it, issued a conditional approval that required a correction that was never made. The paperwork had been buried, forgotten, or ignored. I didn't rush. I gathered photos, maps, emails. I filed formal complaints with the county and requests for records under public information laws. I sent a polite letter to the HOA board, not to Linda, asking for a review of towing practices and citing the ordinance that made what she did illegal. The response was swift and furious. Linda showed up at my door that evening, lips pressed thin, eyes bright with righteous anger. She told me I was disruptive. She told me the neighborhood had standards. She told me if I kept pushing, I'd regret it. I looked past her at her perfect lawn, at the stonework she was so proud of, and said quietly, "So do I." The county moved slower than anger, but faster than fear. Inspectors came. Surveyors measured. Notices were posted. Linda fought loudly and publicly, accusing me of harassment, of jealousy, of trying to tear down the community. But facts don't raise their voices. They just sit there, heavy and unmovable. The night before the final decision, my car was returned. No apology, just a receipt slid under my door. The fee waived. By morning, the street was blocked off with cones and yellow tape. Heavy equipment idled, engines humming like a warning. I stood with my mother on the porch, her hand warm in mine. Neighbors gathered, whispering. Linda was there too, shouting into her phone, face pale, hair undone. The county's order had come through. The structure violated a critical easement. Temporary fixes weren't allowed. The house had to be removed. Removed. By noon, the walls that had loomed over us for years were coming down piece by piece. It wasn't explosive or dramatic, just the steady, irreversible work of correction. Dust hung in the air, stone cracked. A place that had once seemed untouchable became, suddenly, very small. I didn't cheer, I didn't smile. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. No one wins when homes are lost, but there is a difference between loss and consequence. In the weeks that followed, the HOA changed. New leadership, open meetings, clear rules that made room for real life. The towing policy was repealed. Street parking was allowed. Grace became a word people used without rolling their eyes. Linda moved away. I heard she blamed me. Maybe she always would. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the street filled with the sound of kids playing, Mark leaned against my fence and said, "You know, most people would have just moved." I shook my head. "Most people are tired," I said. "That doesn't mean they're wrong." I planted a tree where Linda's hedge once stood, right at the edge of the easement. It's still small, still growing. But every time I water it, I think about that night, about standing barefoot in the dark watching my car disappear, about how easy it is for power to forget compassion, and how important it is for ordinary people to remember their worth. Rules matter. So do people. And when the two collide, it shouldn't take a midnight tow to remind us which one comes first.